That was amazing. I'm going to cry. Jeez, I looked at Sherry and said, I think I'm going to cry. She's like, you can't. You got to get up and teach. Oh, gosh. Well, happy Valentine's Day. Thank you guys for being here. This is an important day. And, that's the core idea here is that we are better when we're together. Like relationships work, don't they? When we put effort into it and we make them work, it's just like we're so much better. And so, babe, I'm better when I'm with you. And so y'all look at each other and say that because I need a moment here, okay? Just say it. All right, we're going to give you time to say that again at the end of service and all that stuff. So you know what? I love talking about marriage. I love talking about love. It's fun. It's easy for me. I've been married 18 years and, just love it. I absolutely love being married. To be honest with you, there are days and there are seasons where it's more like leg day than it is date night, right? And there are seasons where it's just like, man, this is tough. This is not a lot of fun. But everybody who's been married knows what I'm talking about, right? If you've lived with a person for more than a month, you know what I'm talking about, right? Right. I mean, you're just going to go through seasons where you're like, I'm not even sure I love you anymore, right? But then you get through that, and the overall picture is this: I am better with you. And so over the next few weeks, the next 3 weeks, what we're going to talk about is this idea of how to stay in love. Because it's so important, and my heart breaks when I see friends and when I see colleagues and when I see people that I know, family members, etc. They hit a place in relationship, they hit a place in marriage where like, I can't do this anymore, and they quit. And I don't think we have to do that. I think the basic premise is this: we're better when we're together, and we can make this work. And so that's what for the next 3 weeks we want to talk about. So here's the thing. Again, I love talking about marriage. I love talking about love. It's an easy thing for me. But there are some things that are not fun for me. Taxes, for instance, not fun. I don't like to talk about them. Anybody else? How about fixing your auto repair? Is that fun? Yeah, I mean, some of you are like, yeah, I can't even relate to you, okay? It's not like I've had my car in the garage this week. Not fun. The mechanic's like, what's it sound like? I'm like, I don't know, and I gave my best shot, and then immediately felt like a fool, right? That's what my car sounds like. He's looking at me like, dude, what? So, but not fun to talk about. Not fun to talk about taxes. Not fun to talk about auto repair. But you know what I realize is that just because it's not fun doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about it. Am I right? Like, here's the thing. If I don't talk about taxes, I'm going to have some dudes in suits show up at my doorstep. You know what I'm talking about? If I don't talk about auto repair, you know what's going to happen is at some point my truck is going to leave me stranded, or worse yet, leave Mrs. Peterson stranded, and she's going to give me a call, and that's not going to go good. That'll hurt the first thing we talked about, love, right? So we have to talk about some things that maybe not are easy. We have to talk about some things that maybe aren't fun. And so what I want to do is, if you love being married, if you love being in love, that's awesome. And I'm going to encourage you to, over the next 3 weeks, talk about it. Take some time and talk about it with the person with whom you're in love. If you don't like talking about it, could I urge you to talk about it anyways? Could I urge you to just take the next 3 weeks and say, you know what? I'm going to talk about my marriage. I'm going to talk about my relationship. It might feel like talking about taxes, or it might feel like talking about auto repair, or it might feel like talking about home maintenance. It might feel like trying to fix your computer. Like, I don't know what your difficult thing is, but if you don't talk about the important things, I promise you this, they're not going to get better. So these next 3 weeks, I want to really, really encourage you to intentionally talk about love, relationship, marriage with the person with whom you're in that relationship, all right? So let's talk a little bit about love and relationships, all right? Here's what I think. I think that love, and fellas, I'm going to need a little help on the slides here. Love is a great idea followed by a lot of hard work, right? Love is a great idea followed by a lot of hard work. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. I think this happens a lot in life. A lot of great ideas, right? So for instance, let me just give you, we're fresh into the new year, and probably a lot of you had a lot of great ideas. You said, you know what, in 2016, I'm going to do something significant. I'm going to do something important. Like one of the top 3 goals every year is lose weight, all right? I'm not going to ask you to put your hand in the air, but I'm guessing that 1 or 2 of us in this room made a resolution this year. I'm going to lose weight. It's a great idea. So when we start talking about losing weight, we're like, yes, I'll feel better, I'll sleep better, I'll look better, just everything's better. So I'm gonna lose weight. So we do, what we do? We go sign up at a gym membership. We get ourselves some sneakers. We get ourselves some gym shorts. We even go out and run. And immediately, as soon as we're back home from the run, we're like, well, that sucked. I don't honestly, like, that was hard work. And so we discipline ourselves and we go out again next day and we put on our sneakers and we put on our gym shorts and we go and we run a little bit more. Like, man, that's hard work. And honestly, you know what? By about the end of January, we're like, I'm okay being chunky. Right? Because it's a great idea to lose weight and to get in shape, but it's followed by a lot of hard work. Hey, let me give you another one. Getting out of debt. Great idea, right? Think about all of the hundreds of dollars you send every month to debt. Imagine if you had no debt and all of that money you could keep. You could play big, you could give big. I mean, that would be amazing. And you're like, you know what? That's incredible. I think being out of debt is a great idea. And so you start. And then you're really hungry and you're like an hour away from home and you're like, Texas Roadhouse. Oh, I can throw peanut shells on the floor. That would be amazing. And all of a sudden, staying out of debt or doing whatever it takes to stay out of debt, to get out of debt, doesn't sound like such a great idea. It's a great idea that's followed by a lot of hard work. Starting a business is a great idea followed by a lot of hard work. Adopting a child, it's a great idea followed by a lot of hard work. Earning a college degree, it's a great idea followed by a lot of hard work. I mean, anytime you want to do anything of significance in your life, it's usually a great idea. And when you're sitting on the couch, it's a great idea. And you might even go and do some prep work. But once the hard work kicks in, you're like, oh, man. That's how love is. I thought of it as exciting. So you start with passion. You start with energy. And then here's what happens. Like, life kind of sets in. And all of a sudden you realize, man, if I'm gonna lose this weight, that means I got to get up at 5 o'clock every morning. That means I can't eat ice cream in bed every night. That actually sounds really good, doesn't it? Right? So like all of a sudden you realize there's things that I'm going to have to do and it's going to inconvenience me. That means I may not be able to stay up as late and watch the shows I used to watch. Or it may mean that I'm going to have to say no to some expenditures that I'd like to spend. It means that life starts setting in and the reality of it sets in. We start to get tired. We get a little distracted. And we kind of lose the edge. And before long we quit. And that's how love works. It's a great idea. It can happen relatively easy. Like it's relatively easy to fall in love, right? Now, I will say this. There are some people who've been deeply wounded, and for you, it's hard to fall in love again. It's hard to trust again. And I'm going to encourage you right now, if you've been in love and you've had your heart ripped out and it's hard for you to trust again, can I just say, love is a worthwhile risk. Like you can live your life in one of two ways. You can live your life like this and you'll never get hit. You'll never get hit. But you'll never know the warmth and the beauty of a hug. If you live your life like this, wide open and vulnerable, the truth is this, you are going to get hit. You're going to get hurt. You're going to have your heart torn apart. But you know what else will happen? You will know the beauty of love. And so if you've been hurt, could I just say to you, please, would you move from this to this? Take a risk, because I promise you, there are some ones out there who God has specifically designed who will love you well. It's worth the risk. Let me encourage you to do that. Having said that, I think falling in love is easier than staying in love. Would you agree with that? Yeah? Falling in love is typically easier than staying in love. So the process of love kind of works like this. I feel love, so I do loving things. So like when I first met Sherry, right? She was gorgeous, and she still is gorgeous, but she was amazing, and everything she said was funny, and everything I said was funny to her, and she just amazing. Like she could absolutely do no wrong. She's still like 95%, but it was like I felt love, so I did loving things. Right? Now, this is what happens in relationships, right? And when you're first into relationships, all you want to do is sit around and write poems. Right? I mean, buying flowers, you can't walk out of Harris Teeter without a flower. The sex is amazing when you first fall in love, isn't it? Right? You help around the house. You encourage your partner's dreams. All of these things, right? We're in love. I feel love, right? So I feel love. I feel all these good and wonderful things, so I do a lot of good and wonderful and loving things. But then life starts to happen, right? So one way life demonstrates itself is something called kids. Can I get a witness? Right. There's nothing like an ill-timed scream to ruin an intimate moment. Can I get another witness? Right. Or a knock on the door, right? You know what I'm saying? Some of you are like, what? You'll figure it out someday. And then there's jobs, right? Like at first you're in love and you're like, I can't wait to get out of work early because I just want to be with her. Who needs money, right? And then you fall in love and you get married and all of a sudden you're like, hey, baby, the boss, I really got to do this. This is important. If I stay in the game, I'm going to get promoted and I really need this extra money. And so you stay a little longer, right? And then there's hobbies, right? Maybe it's golf. Maybe you're a gamer. Maybe you're fixing a car in the garage, whatever it is. But just more life begins to happen. There's friends. Maybe you begin to gain some weight. Maybe you begin to smell old, right? That happens sometimes when you get married. Like before you date, like before when you're just dating or when you're just in love, like you never stink. And then you get married and it's like, well, you know. You start making weird body noises too. That kind of stuff happens as well. Like it's just crazy. Life starts to happen. And then look, so here's what happens. Like one day you realize, like, we don't do the things we used to do. Like we don't act the way we used to act. And here's what we think. The dude thinks this. She's really changed. Right? I just got carried away there. I'm sorry about that. But you do it. You know what I'm saying? And then, but she looks at him with the curlers in her hair and, you know, her cucumbers in her eyes and her mud on her face and says, he's really changed. And so, like, all of a sudden, you used to feel love, so you did loving things, but then life happens, and everything gets kind of crazy, and you get distracted, and the schedules are full, and then this happens. I don't feel love, so I don't do loving things. This is really important. I don't feel love, like I don't have all those, oh gosh, I don't have that anymore. So I don't do loving things. And when you don't feel love, and when you don't do loving things, it's not long before this happens. I quit. I don't feel love. We're not doing loving things. I don't do them for you. You don't do them for me. I quit. And this is the cycle of love. I feel love, so I do loving things. I don't feel love, so I don't do loving things. I quit. And that's how most marriages and relationships end. The moon goes down, the honey runs out, the honeymoon's over, I'm out of here. That's how most relationships end. I would just say, there might be another way. What if there's another way? So let me just ask you some questions. Is it possible to love if you don't feel love? So every married couple in this room probably is going to say yes. It is possible to love when you don't feel love. So, you know, I was said earlier, like some days, like loving your spouse or loving the person with whom you love, it feels more like leg day at the gym than it does date night. It's just hard. But you know it's the right thing, right? So the question is this: is it possible to love if you don't feel love? Let me ask you this: what if feelings are the wrong gauge for love? See, we've learned to trust our feelings a lot. Like, for instance, I don't feel good, so I need to go to the doctor. Right? We trust our feelings. How about this? I was thinking about starting a business, but something doesn't feel right. So we don't. We've learned to trust our feelings. And oftentimes, rightfully so. But what if feelings are the wrong gauge for measuring love? See, I think that feelings are very important, actually. But I think that they're the effect, not the cause of love. especially for people who are well into the game of love. And in this series, what I want to do is I want to really make the case and make my best effort to persuade you that it is absolutely possible to stay married and to stay in love with one person for at least half a century. That's 50 years, right? There are people in this church that have done this. There are people sitting in this room right now that have stayed married and stayed in love. Love like none of us could probably have a really hard time getting our mind around it because it's so big and so mature and so strong. It is possible for one person to love another person and to stay fully committed to that person for half a century or more. I think by the time you hit the half a century mark, you're like, hey, what the heck? We might as well just stay with it, right? Now, these people who have done this, they've discovered something. And it's not a big secret. Anyone can find it. It's easily accessible. They've found this thing, and they've done it consistently, and as a result, they have a love that has lasted for half a century or more. So, Christians believe that our God is all about love. That's one of the, in fact, our leader Jesus said that love is the distinguishing characteristic of believers. Like, if you're a Christian, this is something that should mark you. It's like the t-shirt that you wear. It marks you apart from everyone. So I would just say, if you're in this room and you are a believer, you are a Christian, this is something that not only we should do, but we can do. We can stay in love for a really long time, and enjoy it. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you a sentence that was written by a biographer of Jesus who happened to be his best friend. His name was John. And it's actually a familiar verse. Ironically, Mike quoted it this morning. This is what it is. It's John chapter 3. He says this: God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Now, there's a really important word here. It's that little word, that. God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son. Now, it's interesting here because God, this perfect person who loves well, loved a group of people called the world. Now, if you flip back just a couple pages in John's letter, or John's story of Jesus, you'll read this about the world. Jesus came into the very world he created, but the world, say this with me please, didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and read this with me please, even they rejected him. Now listen, there are some of you in this room that know how that feels. You have loved to the very best of your ability, and you have felt rejection. You have given your absolute best, and it feels like it's been unrecognized, unknown. And this is where most people quit. But the story of God goes like this. He made a decision to love, then he did something loving. This is important. God made a decision to love. He said, there's a group of people, and I love them. And I love them so much that I'm going to do something. He made a decision that was followed by an action. Now, here's why this is important. Because most of us, when we don't feel love or when we're not receiving love, we quit. Is that not right? Like if I'm pouring myself out into this thing and I'm loving you and I'm trying my best and you're not reciprocating, I'm out. But God did something different. When he loved and it wasn't reciprocated, he did something extravagant. He did an over-the-top love. I'm going to shoot straight with you. That's not normal. Like most of us in this room right now, we're hearing that, we're like, yeah, that's good, but he's God, right? And I'm just Paul. If I'll do my best for a few months, or maybe even I'll make this heroic love effort and go for a couple of years. But at some point, if this is not reciprocated, I'm out. This is why this is really important. Let me just say this. Love is a spiritual thing. Here's what I mean by that. Love is not a material thing. Like, so for instance, a house or a car or a job or a hobby or a friend. Like, these are material things that you can see with your eyes. Love is something that we cannot see with our eyes, but we know when it's present. Am I right? Love is a spiritual thing. And therefore, I would suggest that if you and if I are going to love well for a really long time, we're probably going to need spiritual help. Like a nicer car or a bigger house or being better at my hobby isn't necessarily going to help me on the spiritual side of life, which is the love side. And so what I would just say to you is that if and I'm going to get more practical here in just a second, but I need to say this first. If you're at a place where the love game is weak, it might be because you don't have any spiritual game. It might be because you don't have any spiritual resources that are actually helping you to love in an abnormal way. So what I want to do real quick, let me read this to you. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to some of his friends in a little city called Ephesus. In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 16, he said, I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, God will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Some of you need that. You're in a relationship right now where you're like, I'm done. I'm ready to quit. Paul said, I pray that God will give you strength way down on the inside. And then he said this, and Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. So all of a sudden he said, you're going to have access to a love that's not even normal. None of us naturally have this. You, as you trust in Christ, will have access to this whole reservoir of love that does not come naturally to you. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. In other words, we're not talking about just a normal love, I'm going to buy you flowers until I quit feeling happy about you. This is a love that's strong and enduring. He said, may you experience the love of Christ, though it's too great to understand fully. Listen, there are people that I know, and probably that you know as well, who have loved their spouse and loved others in a way that we look at and say, how does that happen? Paul said, it's a love of Christ, which we'll never be able to understand fully. It's such a big love. He said, then you'll be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. Now, all glory to God who is able through his mighty power at work within you. Listen to this. God is able to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think. So let me just say to this. A lot of us in this room on Valentine's Day are like, yahoo, it's Valentine's Day. I'm in love. This is great. Some in this room probably are at a place where you're like, it's Valentine's Day, and this might be our last Valentine's Day together. Paul basically said there is a God who's all about love, who is able to do infinitely more than you ever can ask or think if you'll trust him. So I would simply say to everyone in this room, love is a spiritual thing. And at some point, if you're going to do love well, you've got to tap into a spiritual resource. And God said, I'll be that resource. I have love. I have a reservoir of love that's bigger and stronger and more enduring than anything you've ever known. So simply, I would say this to you. Before you make any decisions about love or the state of love that you're in, could I just say to you, would you just reach out to God? And it might be as simple as this. God, I'm in a situation here. I've run out of love. I'm ready to quit. I need some help. I need some love. And start there and see what happens. Something might happen like boom, like right away, or it may not happen right away. Maybe it takes some time. But I would say if you don't have God on the love game, it's not going to work. Now, you reach out to God, you make the because love is a spiritual thing, you reach out to the spiritual resource, then you make a risky but potentially game-changing decision. See, let me just remind you, this is the normal way that love works. I feel love, so I do loving things, right? I'm giddy, I love you, you're beautiful, like everything you say is right, every joke you tell is funny, and you even drive perfect, right? And then life happens. And your jokes aren't so funny, and you really can't drive that well, and just like the love starts to go away. I don't feel love, so I don't do loving things anymore. I'm done. That's the normal way that love works. But with God's help, with God's instruction, with God's resources, this is the way that it can work. I feel love, so I do loving things, right? Everything you say is funny. You're always pretty. Your breath always smells great, right? So I do loving things. And then life happens, and you start to lose the edge. The kids start yelling, and the job gets too long, and all this stuff, right? And then this happens. I don't feel love. Here's a new paradigm. I don't feel love, so I do loving things, and look what happens. I feel love again. I don't feel love. The old way says, so I don't do loving things. God's paradigm says, I don't feel love, so I do loving things. And the result of that is that the spark of love becomes alive again. Think about this. When you felt love, you walked in the door with flowers. When you didn't feel love, you walked in the door with criticism. What would happen if you walked in the door with flowers again? You might be surprised, and I'm talking to the fellas here now, right? And ladies, I mean, you've got your game too. Because I guarantee there are days in your life where you're like, I don't feel like I love him anymore. But what would happen if you did something loving? See, here's what I've realized in 18 years, and this is something that people who are married 50 plus years have told me as well. This is it. When you do love, you'll feel love. Some of you are stuck, and your relationship is dusty because you haven't done love in a long time. What would happen if you started to do love? See, here's the good news. The person that you're in a relationship with, the person that you're married to, they fell in love with you once, didn't they? They fell in love with you once. Like you did the right things. Your game was strong. You did it right. It's absolutely possible that they could fall in love with you again if you started doing the right things again. So let me ask you some really important questions. Do you want to be in love? Like, do you want to be in love? Or do you just want to live like you're living for the rest of your life? If you're in love and your marriage is great and your relationship is strong, that's awesome, and I pray to God that that will be the course of your relationship for the rest of your life. But if you're not there, if you're just kind of like existing like roommates in college, right? Do you want to be in love? And then the next question is this: are you willing to work hard for love? Are you really willing to do some hard work? Because staying in love requires hard work. Listen, everything that's good requires hard work. If you want to be strong and in shape, hard work. If you want to be wealthy, hard work. If you want to be in love and have a great marriage, hard work. Hard work prefaces anything that's worth anything, right? And here's another question. Are you willing to do loving things even when you don't feel loving? Because that's what it's going to take. That's the model that God set. When love wasn't being reciprocated, when he wasn't feeling a strong love wave, he decided, I love and therefore I will do loving things. Now we've got to answer these questions. Do I want to be in love? Am I willing to work hard for love? Am I willing to do loving things even when I don't feel love? At some point at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon every single one of us in the room to answer these questions. And here's why. A gentleman named Andy Andrews, great author. If you have opportunity to read any of his stuff, I'd encourage you to do that. He wrote this: the end result must be determined before an effective process can be put into place to achieve that result. In other words, I have to know what I want. So some of you right now in this room, if you're at it like, I don't know if I want to make it work with this person, or I don't know if I'm willing to do the work that it's going to take to make this relationship. I don't know. Right? If you don't know, you got to answer that question first. The end result. What is your end result? What is it that you really want? For me, I want to be in love with one woman for the rest of my life. However, once that process is in place, one has only to adhere to the process, those daily steps that lead inevitably to the final result. In other words, what he said, look, what is it that you really want? I want to be in love with my wife for the rest of my life. I want her to be in love with me for the rest of my life, for her life. And then you put a plan together, right? And then you just show up and do those things every single day. So let me tell you how this works, for instance, in my life. Excuse me for a moment. There are 9 things that I want from my life. I wrote them down under the counsel of a life coach. I identified 9 things I want from my life. One of those is, I want my wife to lay in bed every night with a heart filled with gratitude to God because she's married to me. Now, there are definitely nights where gratitude would not be the word I would use to describe what her heart is like. But that's my fault. I want my wife to be so madly in love with me that every night when she lays in bed, she's like, I'm so overwhelmed with love for this guy beside me. Right? Now, put a plan together, right? What's it look like? There are some things that we do regularly and consistently, right? But we have to pay attention to those things every day. So you know what? And this is not brain science. This is what guys who are working really hard do. Every single day at 5:20, I sit down and I have a paper and I write out one thing I'm going to do to show love for Sherry on that day. And it's not always huge. Someday it's like, I'm going to send her 3 texts today. I'm going to massage her feet for 10 minutes today. Someday it's kind of cool, like I'm going to write a poem for her today. Someday it's just like, I'm going to buy a cup of coffee for her today. Sometimes it's like, I'm going to intentionally speak kind and affirming words for her today. Sometimes it's, I'm just going to sit down for 10 minutes and listen. And sometimes that's hard to do, right? I mean, you know that. But it's what someone who's working hard to stay in love does. And the cool thing is, anybody can do that, right? Hello? I mean, the listening thing might be a little hard, but you can do that, right? Like, these are things that anybody can do. See, here's what I'm finding, right? And this is what love is all about. Look at this. Love is not built by the extravagant things you do occasionally. It's built by the simple things you do daily. If I go out and buy my wife an awesome car, that will be awesome for a little while. But then the awesomeness wears off, right? If I go out and take my wife on a really cool cruise, that will be awesome for a little while, but then the awesome wears off. I mean, those things are great. If you can do that, I encourage you to do that. But that's not what love is built on. Love is built on the little things that you do every single day. And you can do this. It might be as simple as sitting down in the morning at 5:20 or whatever time you drag your head out of bed and you write down, this is the one thing I'm going to do today to show my wife I love her. Now, during this series, I'm going to really encourage you to do the loving thing even when you don't feel like it. To do love even when you don't feel love. And watch what happens. I would bet that if every person in this room said, for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to do this. The next 3 weeks, I'm going to do loving things even when I don't feel like I'm in love. It would be amazing what would happen in your relationships. It would, and the thing is, you know how to do loving things. I watch this all the time. A dude will get upset with his wife and he'll be like, this isn't going to work. We can't make this happen. He turns around and does loving things for another woman. WTH, huh? Come on, you know how to do love. Why not? Don't do it to her, do it to her, right? I will do loving things even when I don't feel love. Now, as this series unfolds, I'm going to encourage you strongly to do that, but I'm also going to say there are some action steps I would really encourage you to take, and they look like this. Some of you may say, I just don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. So here's what we want to do. 4 action steps, and we'll talk about them every weekend. I'm going to encourage you, and you may be able to do all 4 of them. If you can, that's awesome. If you can't, that's fine. Pick one. Action step number 1, schedule a weekend away together, just you and her. And guys, I keep talking to you because as I understand Scripture, it's our job to take the initiative in our relationships. Don't be passive, okay? You're a man. Step up. Take the lead. Amen? All right. Ladies, is that what you want? Right? So guys, we can do this. It's our job. We schedule the weekend away. Right? I mean, you may have to talk a little bit of budget with her, right? Don't make decisions that are going to get you killed on that weekend, okay? Schedule a weekend together away. No kids. Like, you can't be intimate with kids. You can't talk for more than a pair. Sherry and I were trying to have a conversation yesterday, and I swear to God, I couldn't get a sentence in without someone having a problem. I'm like, stop it, all right? So no kids, just you and her. Schedule a weekend away, all right? You say, maybe I can't do that. It's too expensive. My schedule doesn't permit. Fine. Here's option number 2. Read a book together. Now, we've partnered together with a local Christian bookstore, and out back in the cove back there, we have 3 books. I've read every one of them. It's 3 books. One is His Needs, Her Needs, How to Affair-Proof Your Marriage by Willard Harley. The other is Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs and his wife. And the third one is The 5 Love Languages. I would encourage you to get one of those books. You can buy them today, all right? We're not making any money on these books. Those are bookstore prices, and they actually slash the taxes. So you're getting them cheaper than you would get them at the bookstore, okay? Pick up a book. You see, I'm talking with a guy right now in another state. He's like, I can't afford a book. I'm like, dude, you're going to pay somewhere. You're going to pay with your marriage or you're going to pay at a bookstore. You better invest in your marriage, right? Go get a book and read it together. You say, I don't like to read. All right, how about this one? Schedule a meeting with a marriage counselor. Now listen, your marriage doesn't even have to be in trouble to schedule a meeting with a marriage counselor. Like you go to the mechanic and get oil changes, right? If you don't do that, if you don't do regular maintenance on your car, it's going to fall apart. This would be like a maintenance check for some of you. Some of you, your car is falling apart and you desperately need an overhaul. And in the back, I've interviewed, because I'm very jealous about who speaks into the life of our church with spiritual things. I've interviewed 2 different counselors, and their information is on the back. I talked to them, asked them a ton of questions. We've talked at length. And so I would encourage you, their information is on the back. Pick that information up. Schedule an appointment. I've even talked with them. They would be willing to come into town to meet with you, all right? And so that might be a third action step that you would take. The fourth action step I would encourage you to take is to get baptized as a couple on February 28th. That's 2 weeks from now. And that's essentially saying, you know what, as a couple, we're going to make a public statement. We're inviting God into our marriage. We're inviting God to be in our home and in our lives, and we're doing it together, and we're stating it to our friends and our church. It's a big deal. February 28th. Now, out in the back, as I mentioned, at a Resource Cove, we've got a gift for every adult in a relationship. I walked in this morning and saw like 20 kids back there. I'm like, get out of there. It's for the adults, all right? I want you to go back there and get your gift. We've got chocolate. How about chocolate on Valentine's Day? Is that good? Right? Get that. And then back, there's books. There's information about marriage resources, etc. Please go check that out. Now, listen. In the next 2 weeks, here's what we're going to do. Next week, we're going to talk about 4 things that if you do these 4 things, there's a 90% chance that you'll fall out of love and get a divorce. 4 things. You do them, 90% chance you fall out of love and get a divorce, all right? So it would be good to be here next week so you can know, I don't want to do those 4 things. And then the final week, which is February 28th, we're going to outline a key decision that if you make this decision, embrace this idea, it will virtually guarantee that you stay in love. It doesn't guarantee that everything is easy, but it guarantees essentially that you live together with one person for half a century or more and love them and receive their love. All right? I think this is going to be an important conversation. Now listen, it concerns me when I was young, right? It was all, I'm still young, actually, I found myself, I called a 20-year-old a kid the other day. I was like, holy crap, what just happened right there, right? So when I was younger, I realized like divorce happened, but we didn't talk about it a lot, right? Now it's almost more common that our marriages are falling apart, right? And I just want you to know this. If you are divorced or have been divorced or are going through a divorce, I love you 100%. There's zero judgment in this church, okay? We love you. We celebrate you. We pray for you. You're my friends. You're one of us. Absolutely. Here's what I'm saying. I just want to fight for wherever you are, this new relationship, right? Or this marriage that you're currently in. Let's make this one last forever. We can do this. We can do this, but it starts with this. I will choose to do love even when I don't feel love. Can you say that with me? I will choose to do love even when I don't feel love. And the reason is this. Here's why we want to fight for this. Because we believe that families and people and you and the church and our communities are better when we stay together. Is that right? All right. We want to hear that song again? Come on, guys. Get up here. Let's do this. Father, we want to say a big thank you to you for your word, for modeling love for us. Even when we didn't reciprocate love, even when we didn't give you any reason to feel love for us, you loved us so much that you made a decision to do something extravagant. You made a decision to love us well, even when we didn't love you well. And as a result, God, there's men and women in this room whose lives have been tremendously impacted and changed forever because of your love. I pray, God, as we reach out to you this morning, help us to love well. Help us to do what you did. In love, even when there's not a really clear reason to do it. Help us to do the loving thing, even when we don't feel loving. Father, at the end of the day, I believe this with all my heart. We can do this, and we're better when we're together. So give us your aid, Father, please, in Christ's name. Amen.